Okay, voilà. Christine, over to you.
Wonderful. Hello, and welcome to this virtual side event as we kick off the 2020 Borlaug Dialogue. My name is Christine Negra. I'll be moderating this session on approaches to advance climate-smart, resilient agriculture for smallholders from the farm to foodscape. We have today 5 panelists with diverse experience related to climate-smart and resilient smallholder agricultural systems who will share their perspectives. They've been asked to focus on solutions tested through their work with agricultural communities in Africa and South Asia. So after listening to their individual remarks, we'll really get into it with a discussion with the panelists that explores viable models for cross-sectoral partnership, innovation, and investment. So already you're hearing some of the themes that are really going to be at the center of our discussion. And again, the focus will be climate resilient smallholder agriculture. And we're going to look to delve into the nexus of agricultural productivity, equitable development, and environmental protection. Toward the end of our session, to help us draw out key insights, we're very pleased to have with us Dr. Ismane Eluafi, the incoming Chief Scientist at FAO, who will provide the closing remarks. On the housekeeping front, please do be aware this virtual event is being recorded. To achieve the best possible audio quality, all participants have been placed on mute. You are definitely invited to add your questions to the chat box at any time, and we will do our best to bring them in, especially to the extent that they relate to the themes of the session, into the panel discussion when we get to that point. For the panelists, I would ask you that you would remain muted, except when you are speaking, either in your opening remarks in the open dialogue. To make best use of our time together, I will provide only the briefest of introductions for the panelists, but I would very much welcome you to look at their full biographies on the event website. So let us just jump right in and begin. Our first panelist is Colin Christensen. He is the Global Policy Director at the 1 Acre Fund, which, as many of you will know, has been a pioneer in scalable innovation with their small-scale farming partners in East Africa. Colin, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. I think I just need to get my slides up. I don't know, Mamadou. There we go. Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here today. I think everyone on this call really understands that smallholder farming is really the most difficult job on the planet. And you know, it's getting even more difficult because of climate change. And so I'll talk very briefly about some of the work that 1 Acre Fund is doing to help farmers manage through this development. But I wanted to start with some words from one of the farmers we serve in Kibuye district in Rwanda, Elizabeth Bayategera. So just going to the next slide, there's a video from her. I don't know, Mamadou, maybe you can just do it. It's not moving on my end. We seem to be having technical challenges here. She is actually narrating this, even though you can't hear her. But I guess you can read the subtitles. So unfortunately, we couldn't hear Elizabeth in her own voice, but hopefully you were able to to read what she was saying. And I think if we can just go to the next slide, One Acre Fund has been serving farmers like Elizabeth since 2006. And we've really been focused on helping support their food security needs. But increasingly, because of some of the concerns that she mentioned, and if you had been able to read the subtitles, um, the those concerns with climate change, I mean, it's all really about how weather is becoming more capricious. It's more floods one year, more droughts another year, sometimes both in one year. And this increasing unpredictability has really caused us to focus more on how we can build the resilience of farmers. And so to do this, we've built a model that allows us to scale very rapidly. So we're a nonprofit, but we work like a business. So we actually generate revenue from what farmers pay us, from the services that we provide. And we do a lot of work to rigorously measure the value of that to farmers. And by increasing their profits by about 50% on average every year, we've really been able to scale. And also that allows us to decrease the amount of donor money that we need. So we're serving about 1 million farmers now across 7 countries. So next slide. And so we provide this complete service bundle to the farmers that we serve. So that starts with asset financing, so fertilizer and seed, but other inputs as well on credit. We distribute to within walking distance of farmers in the very rural areas where we work. We have a network of about 6,500 full-time field officers that provide trainings every week or 2 weeks to farmers. And we also provide market access to our farmers. Next slide. But what we've really thought about doing is figuring out how we can build the resilience of our farmers on top of this logistical and financing chain we've built. So we've thought about interventions that we can scale using our existing model. And we've come really on, 4 basic buckets. If you want to just click through to the first bullet. Mamadou. So it starts with soil health. So we really want to improve the soil health of the farmers that we work with to increase their overall yields. So starting with lime distribution to decrease soil acidity, to composting training to help improve the amount of organic matter in the soil, as well as just supporting farmers to analyze the quality of their soil. We also look to diversify the crops that farmers are growing. Drought-resistant varieties are a key part of it, just because of the increased frequency in droughts that we're anticipating, as well as just diverse fruit crops to give farmers more choices. So potato or groundnut, soya. This picture here is actually chicken delivery in Kenya as an asset that could help build farmer resilience. Crop insurance is a critical part of how we think about resilience. Less than 3% of African smallholders have access to crop insurance. And in the US or Europe, almost all farmers have access to it. And crop insurance is really critical to de-risk investment decisions, especially as the weather becomes more unpredictable. So we provide weather index insurance to the farmers that we support. And then finally, just building nutrition is a way of building family resilience. So we provide eggs or nutrition trainings or more nutritious crops. And I want to thank the Syngenta Foundation actually, because through the Syngenta Foundation partnership that we have, they've really helped us across the board with these interventions. So they're helping us figure out the business case for even larger scale lime distribution. They're helping us build the potato seed supply chain in Kenya, or they actually seconded an actuarial analyst to help us build our insurance product. So it made so much sense that they were organizing this panel today, and we were so grateful to be part of it because our partnership has really focused on the idea of resilience. Next slide. So I wanted to just, with the last minute here, just quickly give you a deeper dive on one particular intervention, because I just gave you a very quick overview of a lot of interventions. And that's on-farm agroforestry. So we've planted about 40 million agroforestry trees over the past 3 or 4 years. But our goal is to plant 250 million by 2024. And the reason we're doing this is that we really see agroforestry, on-farm agroforestry, as really one of the best kept secrets in resilience interventions. There's just a ton of benefit from trees. They give huge economic returns. So just a 10-cent seedling can become a $5 tree in 5 years, and it just becomes more valuable from there. They help with environmental support. They help to control erosion, they fix nitrogen, they increase the amount of organic matter in the soil, and they themselves are very resilient. They have a low susceptibility to weather and disease. Next slide. And so we've built a supply chain of nurseries across the region, which we think is the most scalable model for this work. And from those nurseries, we're able to really create our own supply chain of tree seedlings. Next slide. And then we're able to get those tree seedlings on trucks, through that logistical network that I talked about earlier, and then get those trucks to farmers. Next slide. And then that network of 6,500 field officers I talked about can then teach our farmers the proper planting techniques. And then once it's in the ground, they can really just let it grow. And if you see the final slide I have, you end up with wonderful pictures like this. This is a farmer in Kenya. These are grevillea trees that she only planted 4 years ago, if you can believe it. And they've grown to this size. And this particular farmer was actually able to pay her university school fees for her daughter through selling some of these trees. And so we really are aiming to see many more pictures like this across the region with agroforestry. But really, and that's my final slide, what we're really excited about today is to hear about all the other really interesting interventions that the other panelists are running, and to hear your questions, because I think, as you've seen from what I've just said, there is a lot of different things that we can think about when we think about farmer resilience. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Colin. And I think we're already hearing a couple of kind of overarching themes: soil health, diversification, risk reduction through insurance, nutrition. And I think also hearing, the 1 Acre Fund's particular base of experience, which is focusing on the business side. You talked about the collaboration with the actuarial support, supply chain. So I think those are some really important pieces that we'll get into a bit more as we go to the panel. So thank you very much. Our second panelist today is Dr. Elemne Dejene. He is the Senior Technical Advisor for Environment and Natural Resources Management at World Vision US. He brings decades of experience in building resilience in smallholder communities through a wide array of sustainable agriculture and rural development initiatives. So Elemne, please go ahead.
Need to unmute, Elemne. Unmute. Elemne, you're on mute. You need to unmute. Oh, come on, man. You're on. Elemne, you're on mute. We need to unmute.
Sorry about that.
There we go. Wonderful.
Thank you, Christine. Let me begin my remark with 2 introductory points. The first one is, as you see from the first slide, this is a program that is funded by USAID, implemented through a consortium of CARE, SNV, and our local partner, and is led by World Vision as a prime. It is, what you will hear from me today is generated from a primary data through focused group discussion, interviewing individual farmers, on-site field investigation, and validation of what they have told us. And I have been actively involved in this process and leading it with the national experts, the World Vision and CARE field staff. The second slide, please. This slide has two very important messages and one important implication. That is, Zimbabwe has been impacted by persistent and chronic food insecurity. It is a narrative that has been with us in the past decades. And I do not want to dwell much on the statistics, but clearly, if you look even as of today, with the recent report by the Joint Committee, which involves World Food Program, FAO, and the European Commission and USAID, you have close to 4.5 million people in urgent need of food assistance, and about 1.1 million metric tons of food needed. This enormous dependency on food aid is reinforced very much. In fact, it is inextricably linked to climate shocks that this region receives. I have highlighted some of them. I do not want to, time is precious here, do not want to get too much into them, but clearly you see the El Nino event. The most significant was the 2015 and 2016 Super El Nino, impacted nearly all of Southern Africa. About 23 million people were food insecure and needing emergency. Zimbabwe itself was in a state of emergency, along with many countries. And nearly 5 million people in Zimbabwe needed help, food assistance. You follow by El Nino is the opposite of El Nino, which is flooding the next year. Then you have another moderate to El Nino coming. Then you have the cyclone in 2019. Right after that, I was myself in the field doing this investigation. Well, this looks like a local event, but they are not. And a very important, really, findings here is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. They did the report on 2018, inform us that Southern Africa and Zimbabwe will be facing a drier future, where precipitation will be well below average for the Zambezi and the Limpopo Basin, which are not only important to Zimbabwe, but to the downstream countries. So it is a global phenomenon, certainly, which these communities are devastated. And it has very serious implication about agriculture, which was touched by the first speaker. It will also be continued by the others. How do we really, is this paradigm something, it's a paradigm, what we have in crisis, and how do we find a solution to some extent? Second slide, please. And the solution, no, second slide, please. That is related to the solution. Yeah, you are right. That is really a picture of, yes, the third slide. That is the picture of the cyclone where the schools, the bridges are devastated. Mamadou, the next slide, please. Yes, this is the impact of cyclone that we were. We have to park our car, actually go to the villages. Next slide, please. Looking at the solution to this. The solution in this, what I want to present to you is anchored and based at the community level, and where it is based on water, the most critical limiting factor. And in that is really small scale irrigation schemes through construction of small dams, small meaning that in this case was about 7 meters. It is done through pooling labor, food for work or food for cash. And clearly it is it's more environmentally sound and that can be managed by the communities. Gravitational irrigation scheme. We do have also solar, but a large part of it is small dams. We have some few activities related to solar powered groundwater extraction, but this has some limitation in this. This is a dryland area, very much where water recharge capacity is a little bit limited, but still we do have some very interesting success stories. In both this irrigation scheme, the futures that will come in this presentation is the irrigated garden, where vegetables and horticultures are produced by the community. And where in the interviewed farmers and what we have observed, we have seen that there has been an improvement in dietary diversity. 1 in 4 children under age 5 in Zimbabwe are affected by stunting. So this is really, the vegetable garden has made a very important contribution in this regard. Now, fish pond is really a pilot. I will come to it later, not as significant. But related to this irrigation scheme, closely connected is livestock watering trough that has been established. And all interviewed farmers indicated that the distance they walked to fetch water has substantially reduced. Thereby, their animal health has increased, and thereby income from the sale of animals has also increased. Next slide, please. Now, this is really a dam, a small dam, where really when it is well kept and well managed in terms of natural resource protection, where the water has not been impacted by the dry spell. In a number of the dams that we visited, they have been impacted. Here it is not. Behind this is very important story is how the community has to establish a governing structure and mechanism to really implement and protect the natural resource around the dam. In this case, what the program did was it established the Asset Management Committee. The Asset Management Committee introduced bylaws. The bylaws were also linked to local administration and to the environmental subcommittees that goes all the way to the ward level. And therefore, all these linkages have helped in the protection of the natural resources. And these are really very important investments to be made. Next slide, please, as we have time is precious. Next slide, please. Yes, with that really is a garden. Here is, no, the deep irrigation, please, the earlier one. The garden, yes, thank you. In the deep irrigation, this is a technology, really a very adaptive technology, which farmers can do them. The investment is not much. Here, what is really important is water efficiency, the reduced in evapotranspiration is important. And this efficiency in water use helps them in year-round production. Whereas those irrigated gardens who are using the traditional one with flooding irrigation, using buckets and to water them, have been wasteful. And they are not really, their cycle of production is not year-round as some of those who are using drip irrigation. The challenges here are clearly what is important challenges they face in upscaling this is the supply part. Usually it comes from abroad. Maybe they may need some foreign exchange. And of course, maintenance of that and linking the rural community to this maintenance is important. But I think that if these issues are addressed, certainly you are, therefore, okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So that is very important. Here is a very important element. That is sustainability issue, increased investment in strengthening communities. Very important narrative here is that at the end of our questionnaire, when I asked it, when this program comes to an end, would the asset you have created, that is the dams, the irrigated garden, will they survive? The answer has been immediately yes. Why? Because they have their bylaws there. They do have a garden constitution, and these are very fundamental in protecting them as they go forward. And the garden also is a very important hub where the extension agent regularly comes. They don't miss them because they are linked with the government, and they receive, even non-members receive them. last slide, as time is going, my last slide is really in upscaling this technology that I see that is promising with the right investment on local and community institution. It really is that possibility exists there. Most importantly, it gives us some pathways, and a sort of the communities are now seeing that there is really an alternative pathway to monocropping, to rain-fed, complete dependency on rain-fed agriculture. That shift in paradigm that we see here in very small measures, if we upscale it with the proper investment, this shift in paradigm will really mature very much. I thank you very much, and given time, we cannot go too much. Thank you.
Lemna, thank you so very much. There's quite a few things that you talked about. I'm sure we'll delve into more deeply as we go, but the one that's sticking with me is this point of really working with the communities to understand what they need, making sure they have the right governance structures, and this point about survivable assets when you make an investment in resilient communities. So let's keep that in mind when we get to the panel discussion. Let's please go ahead and talk with our third panelist, who is Dr. Dominic Clauser. He is the R&D lead at the Syngenta Foundation for Sustainable Agriculture, which promotes resilient smallholder ag through crop improvement, quality inputs, training, access to finance and markets, and more. Dominic, over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. Thanks a lot, and great to speak to all of you and be part of that great panel we have. I used the next couple of minutes to inform you what we have done so far in the context of advancing climate smart, resilient agriculture in our projects, and what we have learned by doing it. And I think this is also quite important. It's not always easy to bring these solutions to the farm, and there's some learnings that I'm very much like to share during the next couple of minutes. So please, Mamadou, please next slide. Very quickly, let me just summarize who we are, because sometimes there is a bit of confusion about that. We are a not-for-profit Swiss foundation, or not-for-profit foundation under Swiss law, and we're not to be confused with our corporate mother or father, which is Syngenta Limited, the international crop protection company. We're independent in terms of our organizations to them, and we also have an independent agenda, and that agenda is purely devoted to improving smallholder livelihoods. We aim to achieve that by focusing on three major areas of impact. This is access to seeds, so it's crop breeding programs, mostly for neglected crops, seed systems for neglected crops, working with local seed companies. It's access to value chains, so that farmers have access to inputs, but also have access to offtake markets that are reliable and remunerative. And lastly, and very importantly in the context of resilience, it's access to finance. And there we, for instance, we have pioneered in developing affordable weather insurance products for smallholder farmers that are based on indices rather than sort of damage assessment on farm. How do we operate? Our aim is to deliver scalable innovation to smallholder farmers. What do we mean by that? We follow a very demand-led mindset to identify solutions that might need to be created from scratch or might already be available in terms of technologies and practices that really help smallholder farmers. And doing so, we very much need to understand what farmers need, and there's the importance of the great partners that we have and that are also on this call, like the 1 Acre Fund or the Nature Conservancy, that work with so many farmers and really know what their everyday worries are and where we can work together to improve their livelihoods. We would see ourselves as a catalyst and incubator, so we don't deliver solutions to farmers ourselves most of the time, but really, again, rely on partners. And again, this could be great partners like the 1 Acre Fund, where we work together on that, but also the local private sector, such as seed companies or input providers. So that's our ways of working. And I think the paradigm for sustained delivery of impact and sustained improvement of livelihoods is really making sure that whatever we do creates value at farm level, and not just maybe at farm level, but also at the value chain level around the farm. So it's good for farmers, but also good for organizations that work with farmers. With that, we can go to the next slide, please. So a couple of months ago, we took a strategic decision to say whatever we want to deliver in the future in terms of technologies and practices, it has to also deliver climate smart outcomes to farmers. And by doing that, we first had to reflect and identify what climate smart really means. And you have on the left-hand side of the slide, you have the 3 pillars: resilience, mitigation, and production. So that's the area it covers. And in the German, there's a German saying that this is almost too good to be true. It's like the egg-producing, milk-producing, wool-producing pig. So it's all in one. And it's a bit, it's a bit an ambitious concept, but actually reflecting further, we can say that it works in a certain context. So there's really technologies that can deliver resilience and mitigation benefits, and also then improve the productivity of farming. However, what we oftentimes see when we analyze interventions is that they don't really always deliver benefits on scale. So farmer adoption is still a bit challenging, and our thinking and hypothesis on that is that especially resilience and mitigation benefits tend to not to be that easily monetized by farmers. So there's a need to create value for farmers and again at partners in the ag value chain from resilience and mitigation benefits. Please go to the next slide. I would like to take 2 case studies of work that we did. The first is scaling the adoption of rotation crops. Of course, crop rotations are very good, especially in Africa, where we have maize monocultures in many parts of the continent. So the outcome target of introducing new rotation crops is to provide resilience and mitigation benefits, better input use efficiency in terms of nutrients and crop protection, and the value proposition also by diversifying your production. So it's a bit like in the stock market today, if you only have shares with airlines, that might not be a good news. But if you have a diversified portfolio, that's better. And the same applies, of course, for farmers and their production. The problem we have there is seed of rotation crop is not readily available. And there's always a bit of a chicken and egg problem in African farming systems that whenever farmers need the seed, it's not available. And whenever seed companies try to produce the seed, they don't really see demand from farmers. So our approach here was to de-risk the market entry of small seed companies by testing new varieties, really showing that they work. And also by transferring the IP from the mostly public breeders to local seed companies to ensure that they have a freedom to operate and can really produce these seeds. However, the learning was that this isn't enough. There's more to be done. And I think this is, if you look at the left-hand side of the slides, the technology is good. We have good varieties, but then we need the appropriate services and enablers, which, for instance, are conducive regulations. It's extensions. Farmers have to learn how to grow new crops. It's input supply channels beyond seed. For instance, for legumes, rhizobia are always very important. And then, most importantly, it's offtake markets. Remunerative and reliable offtake markets for seeds and the eventual products that farmers grow. And again, here it's great to have partners like the One Acre Fund, AgVenture, and TNC, for instance, that really help us, get these markets going. So that's really exciting. And as a new approach that we now implement, so we worked ourselves down from technology to services to markets. The new approach is to start from the other way around, and we did a very interesting study on crop rotations, market potential of crop rotations, which can be shared and can be found also on the Syngenta Foundation webpage. Next slide, please. The other case studies on soil diagnostics. One slide back, please. Where the outcome target we had is really there's cheap, affordable soil diagnostics available to farmers these days, but you have to combine them with appropriate enabling factors such as access to inputs, access to extension, so that farmers can understand the readouts of the soil diagnostic tools. And that's a partnership we do with the Nature Conservancy. And we just finished our pilot on that, and we got our learnings that really you have to drag in input suppliers for instance, for improved for improved fertilizer blends and so forth. And you also, in the new phase, you also have to work closer with offtake markets, because the surplus production that farmers have needs to be brought to a reliable market. Next slide, and final slide, please, Mamadou. So in short, to summarize, I think there's like 3 points I would like to really highlight that we learned. The first point is we have to avoid pushing technology out. There's an old saying that is, if you had a hammer, all you see is nails, and sometimes the same applies for agricultural research, for development. Really scrutinize your solution on whether it fits local demand and local needs, and whether it provides a value proposition to farmers. And again, I think this is where we have such a great collaboration with the partners we have. Second is, it's hardly the technology on its own, it's services and enablers that need to be in place, and it's always good to consider those. So what enabling factors are really needed to ensure sustained adoption and sustained impact? Services, enabling factors, so forth. And the third pillar is, bottom right, is markets. How can farmers monetize the value created by the adoption of sustainable technologies, climate smart technologies? And I think that's something we really also is worth scrutinizing. And interestingly, there's good recent papers out on that. If you look at authors like Mark Schutt, Leonard Waltering, Bernard van Lauwe, Ken Giller, or even the ever so eloquent moderator of this panel, who did a small piece of work with myself. Again, sources can be provided for that, but it's really interesting and worthwhile reading. And with that, I would like to hand back over to Christine, and thank you for your attention.
Wonderful, thank you, Dominic. And you know, you in addition to those sort of key points, which I think you raised really well, there's sort of a meta point that I'm picking up too, which is the roles in the ecosystem. You know, you talked about the foundation as an incubator, working very closely with partners, and I think that may be something we can also pick up when we get to the panel, is that it's no one organization doing it all by themselves. It's everyone working together in a way where, you know, everyone's kind of doing their bringing their unique value and knowing how to do handoffs and collaboration really well. So thank you for that. Great, let's move on to our fourth panelist, who is Dr. Thomas Obertour. He is the Director of Business and Partnership Development at the African Plant Nutrition Institute. So to today's conversation, he's bringing a wide-ranging expertise in soil fertility management, land resource information, agricultural market development, eco-agriculture, and more. So Thomas, the floor is now yours.
Thank you, Christine. And good day to all of you. My name is Thomas, as just heard, and I'm working with the African Plant Nutrition Institute. And it's indeed a pleasure to be here on the panel with such distinguished panelists, but also with the organizations they represent, which to most of you, they are household names. And there's my organization, African Plant Nutrition Institute, or APNI, is a relatively new organization. It's just about a year old, although it's got a long legacy through preceding organizations, but it may not yet known to some of you that well. And so therefore, I'd like to, in my brief remarks, to give you a little bit of our operating context, our engagement mode, and then show you a few concrete case examples. So indeed, it's a pleasure to talk to you about our work on de-risking fertilizer use across the African continent with farmers. Next slide. So why does it matter? Well, it simply matters because crop nutrients are vital to ensure adequate nutrition of people through crop growth and crop yields that are resilient to both climate change and to increasing extreme weather events. Unfortunately, at the same time, today in Africa, nutrient applications from both inorganic and organic sources have remained stubbornly low. We have missed by far the target of 50 kilograms of fertilizers per hectare per agricultural area, which was already set out in 2006 for 2015 by the Abuja Declaration. And in fact, as you can see on this slide, only 4 to 5 kilograms of N-P2O5K2O are applied every year to every agricultural hectare. Now, we already heard in the preceding talks, there's a plethora of agronomic, social, economic, environmental, operational, and of course, institutional factors, all of which inhibit change towards the better. But most importantly, from a practical point of view, actual responses of crops to fertilizers are highly, highly erratic. And by buying all the inputs in advance, farmers virtually carry all the risk. Next slide. And so, probably not surprisingly, but definitely most concerningly, African soils are losing nutrients at an alarming and precarious pace, at an estimated rate of 50 kg NPK per hectare in cereal systems only. Next slide. Which costs society every year more than $5 billion only in cereal systems. Now, for change, it's okay, move ahead. For change to happen in Africa, in farmers' fields, I think there's a wonderful and great opportunity. And again, we have heard some of that before already. There's a great opportunity that we shift our focus on a germplasm-driven increase of yield to one of increasing yields and productivity of inputs through an innovative integration of both germplasm and knowledge-driven agronomy. And what plays in our hands here, farmers are natural experimenters. They stand ready to innovate. They stand ready to implement such an approach. They have done so for generations. But importantly, they must become part of a solution and co-own innovations that work. Now, at the same time, we know that the average African farmer requires low risk, high return market settings for experimentation and innovation to systematically take place. Now, and risk management in turn requires knowledge. Already in, I believe, 2017, FAO Director General De Silva noted that the future of agriculture is not input intensive, but knowledge intensive. And that will become the new paradigm. Next slide. And APNI, as a research for development institution, aims obviously to contribute to that knowledge, and we do so through pursuing our mission, which is enhancing plant nutrition for a resilient and food secure Africa. Next slide. And that mission is primarily driven through a central pillar of research that enables to enhance the widespread adoption of precision nutrient management and supported, next slide, by research on climate and weather smart plant nutrition on one hand, and on the other hand, by efforts that aim to unlock, in my opinion, the tremendous potential that improving soil health holds for improving livelihoods. Next slide. So APNI and partners really aim to generate knowledge that is relevant for farmers, credible for evidence-based change, and legitimate for equitable change. Next slide. And we do so principally through two generation and delivery pathways. The first one is inclusive knowledge generation. Quite simply, where researchers and farmers team up to develop interventions which are then given to partners for scaling. The second pathway, and in my opinion, we would use that. I have lost my slides. Are they still there somewhere? Mamadou, or should I continue from my machine here? All right, back we are. Perfect. So the second pathway, first one, inclusive knowledge generation. The second pathway, and I believe for us as a knowledge organization, which this one is becoming increasingly important, is that we take part in farmer-centric innovation systems, which are actually cases where a whole range of actors is coming together locally, including obviously farmers, to develop locally relevant solutions, which are then scaled through peer-to-peer farmer processes and through the value chains serving the respective systems. And again, we had some exciting examples before of that pathway. Next slide. And both approaches are flexible enough to be adopted to a range of different scenarios at hand. And I'd like to show you now 3 concrete examples. Next slide, representing 4 countries, which in turn represent the growing footprint of APNI across the country and then from the north via the west to the east. And my first example pertains really to 3 cereal legume systems. And again, I'm glad the preceding speakers mentioned the pertinent role of diversification within agricultural systems. And this is a classic example here. And here the innovation platform really consists of a network of on-farm nutrient trials across 3 countries that enable APNI staff to directly and strongly engage with national extension services, which in turn opens up farmer dialogue channels, aiming to stabilize incomes of 10,000 farmers in a highly erratic landscape with extreme climates intra and inter-season. Next slide. My second example pertains really it actually links Ghana in the west with Ethiopia in the east, and it pertains to maize and teff systems. And here the innovation platform is our starting point, where we team up with various institutions, pooling the knowledge that in turn enables the establishment of critical benchmarking trials that showcase the possible performance. These in turn are linked to learning farms connected to about 80,000 smallholders, which are all organized in co-ops. And this is an important point, providing the social fabrics to experiment and to develop innovation. My last slide, please. So the last example, we are moving back to the east, to Kenya, and here we are focusing on maize legume systems, adopted a slightly different version of farmer engagement pathways, mother and baby trials, quite known. But for us specifically, it provides the opportunity to train extension agents, and we heard the need for improved extension, both of government and private extension services, with a dual goal: increasing yields, improving diets for 120,000 smallholder farmers in Kenya. With that, I yield over to you, Christine, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Thomas. And you were super clear about the focus on inclusive knowledge generation and farmer-centric innovation. And those words are in some ways easy to say, but I'm sure as you are discovering, it's not so easy to do. And the path is not always fully charted. So I think, hopefully we'll come back and talk more about that. And certainly very glad that your new institute is up and running so you can be really part of that solution. So thank you. Our final panelist is Dr. Priya Shamsundar. She is the lead economist at the Nature Conservancy, where she heads a global science program focused on green infrastructure, behavioral nudges, economic instruments, and other dimensions of the economics of conservation, which I will be honest, I don't know that much about. So I'm very eager to hear your comments, Priya. I know that we've muddled through a couple of minor technical challenges, and I know, Priya, you may have some as well, given your connectivity, but we will get there. So please go ahead, and we're really looking forward to what you have to say.
Great, thank you. Oh gosh, obviously there's an echo. Can you hear the echo?
You sound good to me.
Okay, I am hearing
me try this. Is this better? No.
It sounds
No.
very clear.
I'm going to try, though it's a bit odd because I hear myself. Let me see if this is a bit better. I
Priya,
apologize.
actually,
We've been trying
if I
to
can interrupt, it was
work
better
through
the other
our
way.
internet connector for a few days now, but we have, I sit about 10 minutes from the Nature Conservancy's main office in the Washington, D.C. metro area, but the internet service has really been very difficult the last few days.
It was better
So
before,
hopefully
Priya.
we'll
It was
work our
better
way through
before you
this.
made that switch.
Okay. Good morning, good evening, wherever you are. Thank you, Syngenta Foundation and panel for this invitation to present our own example of how we are working through the nexus between climate, resilient agriculture, smallholder needs, and economic development in South Asia. Next slide, please. TNC has a major strategy on regenerative food systems from the field to foodscapes. What do we mean by this? What we would like to be able to do is actively restore nature in and around production areas. We want to also have a major focus on climate resilient systems, as has just been discussed. And the goal of reducing greenhouse gas emissions is a goal across the Conservancy. So our work on foodscapes and food systems also has within it climate change mitigation and adaptation as an important set of goals. However, we are also very committed to working with farmers, fishers, ranchers, and others who provide food. There are most certainly short-term considerations and long-term considerations that we want to work through. So our entry point into conservation in the area of food systems is through the farmers who produce food. Next slide, please. So what is our strategy as we scale up our own efforts in this area? First, smart growth. We think there are technologies, there are enabling conditions, there are strategies to be smart about our growth so that we do this without destroying our habitats and without degradation. We're very much interested in securing fresh water, which is an important ingredient into our food systems. We have perhaps a good amount of experience with sort of linking source water protection with water uses, unveiling the importance of source water protection in making sure that we have sustainable supply of water, whether it's for cities or for farmers for use in food systems, and creating the institutional mechanism so this connection can be internalized through our water funds, work on water funds. The third aspect of our work is really to challenge ourselves and challenge the agriculture, the food and the beverage sectors to go beyond sustainability and to be thinking about agricultural systems so that they can really restore and be regenerative to nature, whether it's land or whether it's the seas. Next slide, please. We don't obviously have the answers to all of these questions, but all of you on this panel are providing many of these answers with your experiments on the ground, which we too hope to continue to do to build these, build a new food economy. As part of our strategy, we have a set of instruments, technologies, efforts that are reasonably mature in the North America and Latin American regions, but that we're still trying in many ways in the other parts of the world and which still have to grow to be scaled. So these are technologies that include agroforestry systems, zero tillage, silvopasture, cover cropping, planned rotation, grazing, and so on. But there's a lot of work still to be done to unlock market signals so that we can make this connection between ecosystem service provision and the well-being of smallholders so that they internalize the services, the service provision into their own decision-making and to the policies, structures that enable this internalization to happen. So I will now walk you through one example where we are experimenting with a set of strategies around zero-till agriculture. And this is in India. And there is no better example in my mind of the interconnections and the challenges between food production and economic development, the need to bring farmers along and to enable the well-being of several others who are dependent on these farmers, both for their health and for their food in many ways. So if you can go to the next slide, please. What I want to walk you through is a particular example in India, where right now, as we speak, farmers are burning their fields to get rid of rice residue as they move from their rice crop to their wheat crop. They have a very short period of time, about 20 days to clear their fields of all the waste that they think of as waste that's on their fields and to move into their wheat crop. And this is happening in the rice basket, in the food basket of India, which is where the Green Revolution happened. Northwestern India is the breadbasket of India. This produces rice and wheat that keeps India food secure. So about 30 to 40% of the public acquired procurement of grains happens from this region, two states called Punjab and Haryana. However, to save groundwater in the region, the governments in the states mandated that the rice transplanting season be moved to match the monsoons, the arrival of the monsoons. And so what this resulted meant was that the crop moved from April, May to June, and which really delayed everything after that, enabling farmers to only have about 20 days to go from rice harvesting to wheat production. So what is the easiest thing they can do to make the shift between the two crops? They light a match. And what this means is that there is a huge amount of smog and pollution in the air. And the Delhi airshed, which has about 18 million people, falls within the range of the pollution. So during the peak season, about 30 to 45% of the air pollution in New Delhi, for example, and across Northwest India, comes because of the burning in the farms, in the breadbasket of India. Now, this was a precursor of COVID. A couple of years ago, and it's happened consistently, all the elementary schools, 4,000 schools were closed for over a week. All manner of transportation just stalls in the region because it's so difficult to move. It is a very serious crisis, and we are sort of watching right now with COVID because there's a huge concern about the comorbidities between the air pollution and the pandemic challenge. So next slide, please. So farmers are burning because the perception is that they have no other alternatives. They have there are about 2 million farmers, 4 million hectares. They have to move really rapidly. And so when we started thinking about this problem about 3 years ago, we delved into it to think and brought a group of people together to, okay, I need to wrap up. I'm so sorry. So anyway, the solution to this problem, which we
finish your example, of course, yeah,
through some deep analytical work, was to next slide, please, was a technological solution, a no-drill tractor-driven device called the Happy Seeder that could drill into the straw directly and enable farmers to sow their wheat. Next slide, please. And so TNC has been working in something like 75 to 150 villages right now to enable farmers to use this no-drill technology called the Happy Seeder and have them use this as an alternative to burning their fields. But there are a host of problems. It's, as all of you who work with farmers know, that it's not just sort of making sure that the supply is available, but there's a set of demand side issues and a set of policy issues that make these shifts and a diffusion of technology at scale really challenging. And so while we're working with expanding the use of Happy Seeders, we're also working with the Syngenta Foundation, next slide please, with supporting agricultural entrepreneurs who can provide end-to-end solutions. This is a very small pilot that has just been launched. So we see part of the challenge being that we need to service the needs of farmers in multiple ways in order to sort of leverage the end of residue burning and increase climate smart, soil healthy agriculture at the same time. And so we've launched this new project on agricultural entrepreneurs as a follow-up to the Happy Seeder strategy. And this is where we are. I'm very sorry to have gone on, but let's end with the last slide. We've heard from all of you that there are strategies that are feasible, but the challenges are also very deep. And it's been really wonderful to hear some of these solutions that have been presented by the rest of the panel on how you can think about increasing returns, but also reducing risks at the same time for smallholders, which is absolutely what we have to do if we want to create these resilient foodscapes. Thank you.
Priya, that's extremely well said.
To go back to the other system I had of hearing without Zoom.
Perfect. Technology, we will muddle through. So thank you so much for that. You spoke about a lot of things, but I think I did want to highlight, because you mentioned the demand side issues, policy issues, and I think TNC as a global organization has the ability to see some of the common threads and how those issues kind of can be, the innovations that can come to those components of it, not just the technology innovation. So I think that's really important. So let me thank everyone on the panel. This has been a broad-ranging, highly thematic set of presentations. And I think you've given us a framework for considering many of the dimensions of climate smart and resilient agriculture in the smallholder production context. So I think we're ready to go further and have a bit of an interactive discussion. I would like, because I know there's questions coming in on the chat, but I think there's a way that we can kind of move through the panel for my first question to you and go in the order in which you originally spoke. So starting with Colin and going from there. What I'd like us to do first is address this topic of testing innovation. So you've all addressed that. And I think we've already commented a bit about approaches that work well and some approaches that maybe have not worked so well for identifying innovations that really have strong technical potential, but also can be delivered with meaningful impact at the farm scale and beyond. So I think I'd like to go through each of you and invite you to just comment briefly, elaborate on something you already said or introduce a new point. And as you do, if you could maybe, Colin, if I can ask you to address this point about that came up in the chat about soil health and adapting to climate change. If you can bring that piece into your comments, that would be great. Alemne, if you can maybe just say one or two more things about the irrigated garden approach. And Dominic and maybe others talking about this question that came in about working outside of sort of, quote, the easy context, the challenging context and cherry picking. So if you could talk about innovation with those ideas in mind, that'd be great. So Colin, if you can kick us off, and then we'll just move through the speaking order.
Yeah, sure. I think Volker's question about our soil analysis speaks to, I think, an interesting tension when we think about innovation, which is, how do you both use innovative technology to come up with solutions, but then how do you successfully scale that? So we started really investing a lot in soil analysis, using basically a series of, a network of labs that we created to help test farmer soil. We created those because we realized that, sort of what, Thomas had mentioned, I mean, fertilizer use becomes very complex, and there shouldn't be a one size fits all approach to fertilizer. What one farmer might need in their field isn't necessarily what another farmer needs. And there might be other issues like, let's say, acidity that particularly affect one group of farmers. So we really realized that really analyzing what a particular farmer's soil needs was really critical. And we wanted to become much more scientific in doing that. And so we are doing that, and we are trying to figure out how to give more targeted recommendations. But the problem for us also from a scaling perspective is, we have our fleets of trucks moving around with inputs, right? It's really, really difficult to give, 100 varieties of fertilizer blends to the 100 needs that farmers might have. And so the trick for us is to find that sweet spot between targeted recommendations, but also what's logistically possible, especially when you work at our scale. I mean, 400,000 farmers in Kenya means that, we need a procurement and a supply chain that can, deliver at that scale. And so it's not possible to give every single farmer the particular blend of fertilizer they need. So I think that's true with a lot of innovations where it helps you, give better solutions to what people really need. But you then need to be able to do it at a large scale, and that just requires like a give and take in how specific you can make your intervention. I don't know if that answers the question, Christine.
No, that's super helpful, and I think logistics also falls in the bucket of easy to say, very hard to do well and meet a lot of diverse needs. Alemne, if I can ask you to give a brief kind of elaboration on this topic of testing and identifying innovations.
Yes, with regard to small-scale irrigation scheme using the drip irrigation system, we can identify really 3 areas of, the innovation has very high potential, but 3 areas of challenge. One is really the adequate local supply of the materials itself. Is there the supply part of it as well as the demand part of it? Is there really, are there people who are producing this at the local level, making it available to these farmers and linking community with suppliers? These are really, as best as the technology works, how it is linked and how it can be sustained depends on the local production of the material and how we can support in this investment in this regard. That is one element of it. The second part is really the technical advice farmer will need. That is to say that when you have people are moving to a year-round production, when they cultivate one crop, the next crop, what it would be, because you really cannot, you have to understand about the pest predators of crops. If you plant tomato this time, next time you cannot plant potato because they have the same pest predators. And the soil health issue, which others colleague also spoke, what are really the nutrients, that the nitrogen fixing nutrients that farmers should also have. These are important things. And the third part with innovation really, and very central, and that's what I didn't have time to get into it, is the mechanism, institutional mechanism. They have a garden constitution that says when water will be turned off, when it is, how you protect the fences. This needs bylaws that needs to be enforced, and people have to also some little training is also needed. And that sort of mechanisms, the enforcement and the institutional community at the community level is very important in sustaining innovation. Thank you.
Oh, that's perfect, Alemne. Thank you. And I couldn't agree more. And of course, this point about institutional mechanism that reflects local conditions, local cultural norms is again, a challenge, but something that really can make the difference. Great. Dominic, if we can turn over to you and just emphasizing, if you can, innovation in challenging contexts.
Yeah, well, thanks, Christine. I think there's a couple of points that I can make is, in terms of testing innovation, I think we and many other organizations had a track record of, for instance, for genetics, testing them on station trials and really going for high yields. that's a model I think we now are reconsidering, and again working with our partners to work more closely to the farm, because what happens on station normally doesn't reflect on what happens on the farm in terms of input use, in terms of the reliability of agronomic processes. So I think that's testing it where you want to grow it, I think is very important. And by doing so, there's sometimes unexpected findings. I think, again, we looked a lot at yields, and that was the determining factor for new varieties. Actually, the most important determining factor we had is the ease of producing seed of new varieties. So how does a variety multiply? That's, for instance, what seed companies are very much interested in. So again, I think focusing, really segmenting the markets, figuring out who's the beneficiary, and then following that mindset, that helps. The other aspect I think was mentioned by Colin and the Lemne is supply chains. It's very important to have reliable supply chains. I think that's a mistake many agriculture for development projects or a challenge have, is once the project finishes, the supply chain finishes, and that leaves farmers without the benefits. And I think on that might let me turn on the question we had on potential cherry picking. I see that point to a certain extent, but it has to be put into context, I think. So of course we are active in certain agroecologies that are not marginal, not deserts, mostly, but not exclusively, I have to say. And I think one of the reasons for that is if you really want to drive systemic change and really introduce sustained delivery channels or sustainable delivery channels, there's certain boxes that have to be ticked. And one is the reliability of the political environment. One is the reliability, again, on supply channels. So there's a reason where we work. And I think what is important on that is it might be contested on geographies, but it's not on products. We don't do giveaways. We don't go for cheap impact at the end of an initiative, number of farmers, number of hectares. We really try to sustain that, and we don't go for the easy solutions and crops. So I think together with the One Acre Fund and TNC and other partners, we really work on aspects that haven't been working so far, and we really try to make them work. And I think that's important. Maybe I stop here.
That's perfect, Dominic. Thank you so much. Let me turn to Thomas and ask you to just reflect a little bit more on the approach to innovation.
Yeah, and I'd like to continue where Dominic stopped. I think there's nothing wrong with the concept of high yields. I mean, every farmer loves high yield, right? But I think what to me it also stood out of this conversation is that we truly see a paradigm shift going on, and that is an increasing realization, not to that degree I'd like to see it, but an increasing realization that technology alone is not the solution. It never was, right? But I think we are standing now, we start to understand now how to actually make it part of a solution, and previous panelists referred to that. I think we have made huge steps forward in understanding social processes which drive innovation, including gender-specific consideration, and we use them connected to more efforts on the institutional mechanism. We heard about crop insurance, we heard about water funds, we heard about value chains and their role, garden rules, etc. So institutions which had been taken for granted by deploying technology are now really re-looked at and reconstructed, right? And to me, then the third element which comes into play, and that closes the loop to technology, having these two other elements addressed, that enables us to take existing technology and actually re-deliver them through novel concepts, right? And then very often in an existing system, all you need is a catalyst technology. We heard about agroforestry as one element, catalyzing the whole change. There's others, there's forages, targetedly deployed within a cereal legume system to drive animal manure production, etc. And that in turn, for our institution, a small institution working on research, not so much on development per se, but on research for development that would enable us to partner with most organizations on this panel and others to very systematically develop these small triggers which are critical in the system and which help to move it ahead. Specific nutrient recommendations for yield, for drought resistance, etc., and deliver them through these new setup of social processes and institutions. And to me, as Elizabeth in the first video pointed out, farmers have hope. I, as a scientist or ex-scientist, come business developer, that gives me hope to see that paradigm shift taking place at a scale, 1 acre fund, 1 million farmers, producers direct 1 million farmers. So these are true changes.
That's wonderful. And I really appreciate your framing of this kind of re-delivering technology through a much broader frame informed by a broader set of knowledge sets and ongoing research. So fabulous. I think that really does get to the question about approaches to innovation. So Priya, please, give us your thoughts, TNC perspective about how you think about innovation. There has a question come in that's specific to composting and stubble. If you can work that in, that's great. But I think you really do want to stick to that question. Help us understand the TNC innovation thinking.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. I just, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes, you can.
Yes.
I think I will echo some of the points that some of the previous panelists have made about the importance of technology, but understanding sort of the mechanisms through which technology is either delivered or the delivery is hampered. And I think, so especially when we think about scaling, this is so, I mean, you can do absolutely everything to make a small project successful, but to scale that project is an entirely different question. So just learning from what we have in India and elsewhere, part of the story is how do you reduce risks for farmers? And I think we've already seen efforts here, whether it is through insurance mechanisms, whether it's through market access, so vigorous supply chain mechanisms and creating some sort of contractual systems and institutional mechanisms that enable farmers to access large markets, or to one-stop shops. So smallholders in particular, like the 1 acre fund, like what we are trying with the Syngenta Foundation, with the agri entrepreneurs in Punjab, trying to make it easier for farmers to feel that they're less exposed to risk along all the fronts. And so they're not sort of having to deal with risks at multiple fronts at the same time. The other important area for innovation, I would argue, is anything you can do to reduce transaction costs, right? For smallholders, you want to be able to aggregate their efforts. So they're not, a smallholder cannot do everything him or herself. So you have, but markets are, it cannot also be robust unless they can operate at scale. So those institutions that enable that aggregation so that multiple smallholders come together and the transaction costs of working within large markets are reduced for farmers through mechanisms such as the ones that Alumni was identifying, community organizations, which are, by the way, extremely challenging to scale. And I'm not quite sure if we really, sort of cracked that nut. You absolutely need community organizations, but we have seen a lot of failures with cooperatives around the world in multiple supply chains. So I think understanding how these community institutions or scaling mid-tier institutions can be successful is a real issue moving forward. I'll stop there.
That's perfect, Priya. And I think reflecting back on the panel, because I think we are going to have to close and hand to our closing speaker in a sec, but I just want to note that we really covered a lot of different geographies, a lot of different types of technologies, but and the kind of nuances that each of you are bringing based on where you sit in this larger ecosystem and your primary mandates. But I do see a lot of threads and commonalities and some common areas of investment. And Priya, you just closed on that. I think everyone has mentioned it to one extent or another. How do we bring in new sets of knowledge, marry them together with a more robust capacity to do technology innovation? And so I think that's something people are doing, and we need to be doing more of it. So thank you. So let me close the panel with a lot of gratitude for everything that you brought, and hand over to our closing speaker, who I mentioned earlier is Dr. Ismane Elouafi, who is currently the Director General of the International Center for Biosaline Agriculture, which works on strengthening agricultural productivity in marginal and saline environments, to the question from the chat. Maybe she can offer us something there. And next month, Dr. Elouafi will take on the role of Chief Scientist at FAO. So Ismahani, please, over to you to summarize some of the key themes that you heard.
Thank you very much, Christine. Let me first really thank our 5 speakers. They have given us very variable, diverse perspective. So we have explored the range of perspective on climate smart resilience and sustainable agriculture solution for smallholders. The focus, as you saw, colleague, was on exploring intersection between the agriculture development and the environmental spaces. I think really the shared perspective from our speakers was very focused on the field and communities' voices, not only research or policymakers, which I find it quite unique in this session. So I think we all agree that the impact of climate change, it's disastrous. The huge variability, we heard about the Nino, the Niña, the cyclones, more flood one year, more drought other years. So what is sure is that the weather variability, it's scary, and it is affecting tremendously agricultural production. It is affecting very negatively the farmer's income, the farmer's food security, and nutrition security. What we heard as well, and we all agree on that, is that also the future going to be worse, both in terms of water scarcity, but also in terms of heat. And because we have an immense challenges, we do need to prioritize ecosystem health and seek to transform our food system from extractive to more productive, more restorative systems. So in other words, what we have seen throughout the whole presentation is that we need to establish resilient food systems that are good for the planet. I was very happy with the diversity of approaches that we looked at across Africa and Asia from the speakers. We heard some that are focused on soil health, crop diversification, crop insurance, nutrition approaches, gardening approaches, agroforestry ones, regenerative food system approach, precision nutrient management approach. So all of these are very interesting. I want to also recognize the great example we got from Zimbabwe on the impact of small-scale irrigation. I do believe that small-scale irrigation, particularly for the continent of Africa, is a must, as we have right now only about 7 to 8% irrigated land in Africa versus about 50% in Asia. So the example from Zimbabwe showed us really that we can get, with small-scale irrigation, we can have much higher water efficiency production all year, which means the better income and better livelihood for those farmers. And also having food when you have drought. So we heard throughout many speakers that technology alone is not enough. Some of the speakers went as far as saying we should stop pushing for technology. And really, the speakers, they all talk about really pushing for like a package whereby you don't have only technology, you have also enablers, you have services, you have accessibility to all the needs of the farmers, and most importantly, you have also accessibility to market, which entail accessibility to finance. We heard about the need to monetize really the value of sustainability and of resilience, particularly for the smallholders. I love also the idea of precision nutrient management. It's like precision medicine that we are all a big fan of. So we do need knowledge to be able to customize the solution to the local community, the local farming, the local system. So I think a farmer-centric innovation system is very needed, and they think that's a way for us to move forward. The example for India is wonderful. It's really a good example of finding a technology that saves the life of many people. We all hear about the 1 week window where farmers can't really take more time to take off the rest of the crop residue from rice. They burn it. It's a huge environmental issue, but even for the farmer themselves. So really having a technology that is solving the issue and bringing it at scale, it's excellent. So to sum it up, Christine, I think this session was excellent. It was excellent in its diversity. It was excellent in its divergence to the solution as well. So we all agreed that diversification of our cropping system is critical. We can't do without it. We all agreed that the local knowledge, it's key. The customization of innovation system, it's imperative if we want to go to scale. We all agree that we need to scale up regenerative food system. We need to have a substantive increase in the investment in strengthening communities, be it in institution, be it the way they own the solution, the way they adopt it. We all agreed, I love this and I'm repeating it, that climate smart agriculture for smallholder means you have to increase their returns, their income, and you have to reduce their risks. The picture of grevillea trees, I mean, this is beautiful. This could be anywhere. In the most desertic, the most very dry environment, eventually we could have really beautiful landscapes that really protect the income of the farmers. So I think we witnessed, all of us, really great models throughout all the institutions that presented today. And I think really with all these solutions, we need to go to scale and we need a global move towards more resilient food system. And that's really what we are attempting to do with the UN Food System Summit that hopefully is coming in October 2021, whereby we are really looking for those models that could be scaled up, and all of them have to be resilient food systems that are better for the planet and better for the people. With that, thank you very much, Christina. Over to you.
Oh, Ismahane, thank you so much. That was fabulous. You really did quite an amazing job of capturing the big themes. So thank you so much. And the phrase I'm going to take away from your remarks is knowledge to customize farmer-centric solutions, because I think that's something that I think it's crisp. It captures a lot. It talks about the kinds of investments that need to be made. So I think that hopefully everyone who's participating has captured that idea as well. Obviously, a very large thank you to our 5 panelists, Colin, Alemne, Dominic, Thomas, and Priya, for a very stimulating discussion. Very grateful to you and the work that you're doing. Finally, I'll close by saying thank you to everyone who participated in this virtual event, and I wish you a good week of Borlaug Dialogues, especially in the upcoming session. I think it's scheduled just very shortly. It's going to feature the 2020 World Food Prize laureate, Dr. Ratan Lal, soil scientist. Very happy to see him receiving a very just and well-deserved recognition. And I believe also former Vice President of the United States, Mr. Al Gore, will be part of that session. So we've dug deep, we've done the substance, and now we can progress to see the A-listers and listen to the A-listers and see what they have to say. Thank you to the organizers, and again, thank you so much for being part of this session today. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks everybody on the panel. Thank you very much indeed. Have a good Borlaug Dialogue week.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks.